Chanty showed great improvement in her swordsmanship. Her skills with the sword, her body movements, and her footwork all progressed significantly. However, every night after practice, Lorena still had to treat her wounds and burns from her training sessions with Lewis. Her ability to handle the sword had become impressive. Every day, they practiced on the beach, and her beauty shone even more under the sunlight. She grew even more attractive as she mastered the sword. But she knew she needed to keep practicing. David admired Chanty's determination. During her practice sessions, David, Gabriel, and David's brothers, Marco and Justin, watched her intently. However, Jake observed from a distance. They all noticed her improvement in her movements and skills. She stood on the beach, her eyes focused, her grip firm on the sword. The sun's golden rays illuminated her graceful form, highlighting the strength and determination in her stance. Each evening, Lorena tended to her cuts and burns, gently applying healing balms. The salty sea breeze carried the scent of the ocean, mingling with the earthy aroma of the healing herbs Lorena used. Lewis watched her with a critical eye, using his telekinesis to manipulate the practice dummies around her. He admired her progress. "Excellent, Chanty. Your form is much better," he said, his voice filled with pride. Chanty nodded, her porcelain skin glistening with a light sheen of sweat, the sun painting her cheeks a soft pink. Every swing of her sword was precise, her movements fluid and elegant. The waves crashed against the shore, providing a rhythmic soundtrack to her training. Her agility had improved, her footwork now swift and confident. Her beauty, combined with her newfound skill, made her a captivating sight. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow on the scene, enhancing the dramatic intensity of her practice. David, Gabriel, Marco, and Justin stood nearby, their eyes fixed on her. David's expression was one of admiration and respect. "She's remarkable," he whispered to Gabriel, who nodded in agreement. Even from a distance, Jake couldn't take his eyes off Chanty. He stood apart from the others, his gaze filled with a mix of longing and pride. As she practiced, the sounds of her sword slicing through the air mixed with the soothing whispers of the ocean. Her focus never wavered, each move more confident than the last. Her dedication was evident, and it made her even more attractive. David approached her after the session, his eyes reflecting his admiration. "Chanty, your determination is inspiring," he said. She smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Night fell, and Lorena tended to her wounds once more. "You're getting stronger every day," Lorena said, her voice gentle. She winced slightly but smiled, knowing the pain was worth the progress. The moonlight bathed the beach in a silvery glow, adding a touch of magic to the scene. She stood by the shore, looking out at the endless expanse of the sea. She felt a sense of peace, knowing she was growing stronger, not just in skill, but in spirit. Her journey was far from over, but with each passing day, she felt more prepared for the challenges ahead. In the distance, Jake watched her, his heart heavy with unspoken emotions. He admired her strength and beauty, knowing that her journey was just beginning. Her presence on the beach, under the moonlight, was a sight to behold, a testament to her resilience and determination. She lay in her bed, unable to sleep, her thoughts consumed by someone. Vasper. Her longing for him was momentarily eased by her daily practice sessions with the sword, but every night her heart ached with emptiness. Even the shadow of Vasper was something she yearned to see. If she could, she would scream his name just to lessen the aching loneliness she felt. "Is this truly happening to me?" Chanty thought, gazing out of the window overlooking the beach below. The window in her room still had broken glass from the recent battle between Jacob, and Vasper, and she preferred sleeping in the open room rather than moving to the first floor. The moonlight streamed through her window, casting soft shadows on the floor. She decided she needed the solace of the ocean. Quietly, she slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound. She tiptoed to the door, gently turning the knob and opening it just enough to slip through. The hallway was dark and silent. She moved with the grace of a cat, her bare feet making no sound on the cool marble floor. She made her way through the garden, the night air cool and refreshing. She moved silently past the wrecked infinity pool, a stark reminder of the recent battle between Jacob, and Vasper. She reached the newly built stone staircase that David and his brothers had constructed. She carefully descended the large stone steps, each one cool under her feet. The moon cast long shadows, and the gentle sound of waves grew louder as she neared the shore. The beach was bathed in silver light, and the water shimmered invitingly. She reached the sand and felt its cool grains between her toes. Taking a deep breath, she felt like she was trying to release the pain of her longing. "Vasper, I miss you so much," she whispered into the wind, looking up at the sky. "Why is my fate so cruel?" she asked the heavens. "Why did I fall in love with him? Why him?" Tears streamed down her face. She walked to the water's edge, the waves lapping at her feet. The ocean was calm, and the night was peaceful. Chanty dipped her toes into the water, feeling its coolness. She looked around, confirming that she was alone, then decided to go for a swim. She hesitated at first since she hadn't brought a towel or bathrobe, and she was only wearing an oversized t-shirt without a bra. But her body felt irresistibly drawn to the water. It was past 11 p.m., and she was certain her companions in the mansion were asleep. She looked around again. The only sounds were the waves crashing on the shore and the light from the moon illuminating the beach. "Whatever," she said to herself. She quickly pulled off her oversized t-shirt and tossed it onto a nearby rock. Standing in just her panties, she felt a rush of freedom as she waded into the water. The moonlight highlighted her graceful form, her hair flowing around her, covering her beautiful breasts. The light from the moon accentuated the elegance of her figure. She looked like a goddess under the moon's silvery glow. As she submerged herself in the cool, clear water, the salt stung her healing wounds, but she welcomed the sensation. Her thoughts drifted to Vasper, and she gazed at the spot where their cottage once stood, memories flooding her mind. The sweet taste of Vasper's kisses still felt fresh. "You're going mad, Chanty. Stop this foolishness," she scolded herself. She dived underwater, hoping the water would wash away her feelings. Unbeknownst to Chanty, Jake had been watching her from a distance. He had been outside, unable to sleep, when he saw Chanty leave the garden. He was curious about why she was out so late. He followed her, staying hidden. He watched her from the shadows of a large rock near where Chanty stood, unable to resist the pull she had on him. Seeing Chanty in the moonlight, her body shimmering like a deity, was both captivating and torturous. He struggled with his feelings, deeply in love but always holding back. He bit his lip and clenched his fists, feeling like a volcano about to erupt. He closed his eyes and turned away, but his heart rebelled. One of his powers was hearing, even from a distance if he wished, and he clearly heard Chanty whispering Vasper's name and expressing her longing for the man who was their mortal enemy. The regret hit him like a knife, feeling as if his chest was being stabbed with pain. He could barely breathe, suppressing the anguish he felt. Lost in his pain, he didn't notice his tears until he felt them on his cheek. He touched his face, shocked by his own reaction. He felt like he was being tortured, watching Chanty, but he had no right to feel this way. He kept reminding himself that he had no right to these emotions. He took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. "Life is unfair," he whispered, but only he could hear it. "You can handle this, Jake," he told himself. After a while, Chanty decided it was time to return. The water had helped clear her mind, but her heart still ached with unfulfilled longing. She waded back to the shore, her silhouette highlighted by the moonlight. She wrung out her long, thick hair. She had no idea that Jake was so close, hidden in the shadow of the large rock. His eyes, cold as ice, watched her with intensity, but his body felt like a volcano ready to erupt. His heart, torn apart, fought a battle within itself. The waves caressing her legs as she walked. She picked up her t-shirt and slipped it on, feeling the damp fabric cling to her skin. As she turned to climb back up the stone staircase, Jake stepped out of the shadows. His presence was sudden and intense, stopping her in her tracks. She gasped, her heart racing as their eyes met under the moonlight. "Jake," she whispered, a mix of surprise and confusion in her voice. The moonlight cast dramatic shadows on his strikingly handsome face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. Chanty, he replied, his baritone voice low and filled with concern. He took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking. You shouldn't be out here alone at this hour. It's not safe. The enemy could be lurking anywhere, he added. Shanta's breath caught in her throat. She wondered if Jake had seen her swimming half-naked. She tried to hide her embarrassment, her knees trembling as she forced herself to stay upright. The intensity of his words and the look in his eyes made her heart race. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, surprise, confusion, embarrassment, and a deep sense of vulnerability. "Have you been here long, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake sensed her anxiety. "No, I just got here." He's the best liar, maintaining eye contact with her. They stared at each other for a moment, Chanty trying to read Jake's thoughts but finding nothing. She felt like she was melting under his gaze. Jake's expression softened slightly. "I understand why you're here," he said gently, while glancing at the moon. "But please, be careful. We can't afford to let our guard down." Chanty nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for his concern. "I just needed some time to think. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to take a swim," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper, shivering. Jake offered a small, understanding smile, breaking the silent tension between them. "Oh, sometimes it happens to us, sleepless nights," he said with a long pause between words. "Just promise me you'll be more careful." It took him a while to finish his sentence. She agreed, and together they walked back up the stone staircase, the moonlight guiding their way. As they reached the garden, Jake glanced at her one last time. "Good night, Chanty. Get some rest." "Good night, Jake," she replied, feeling a strange comfort in his presence. Jake watched as Chanty disappeared into her room, his heart heavy with unspoken emotions. He knew he had to keep his feelings hidden, but he couldn't help but worry about losing control. The night air was filled with the sound of the waves, the moonlight casting a serene glow over the scene. Back in her room, Chanty showered, but she felt like she was in a daze, wondering if Jake had seen her swimming. Could it be true that Jake arrived just as she was climbing the stairs back to the mansion? She finished her shower and changed, blow-drying her hair. Despite her attempts to relax, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As Chanty lay back in bed, she felt a mix of embarrassment and regret for going out that night. Knowing that Jake was there made her anxious. She couldn't imagine if Jake had seen her half-naked. Maybe he just didn't want to admit it to spare her feelings? She sat up suddenly, closing her eyes, and pounded her fists on her pillow in frustration. "You're so foolish, Chanty," she scolded herself. She closed her eyes, hoping that sleep would finally come, her thoughts now filled with worry and embarrassment. But sleep eluded her even more. The next day, Chanty felt an overwhelming sense of awkwardness. She knew she would see Jake during her sword practice with Lewis. As she made her way to the training ground on the white sand beach below Jake's modern mansion, her stomach was in knots, her mind racing with the events of the previous night. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jake had seen her swimming half-naked, even though he had denied it. The sun was shining brightly. Lewis was already there, waiting for her. He was a patient and skilled teacher, and over the past weeks, Chanty had made remarkable improvements under his guidance. Her grip on the sword was firm and confident, her movements fluid and precise. She had come a long way from the hesitant beginner she once was. Her strikes were now powerful and accurate, each one fueled by a mixture of determination and frustration. As Chanty began her practice, she noticed that Jake was standing under a large tree not far from the training area. His strikingly handsome face was partially obscured by shadows, but his intense gaze was unmistakable. He watched her with an intensity that made her heart race. She could feel his eyes on her, and it was both exhilarating and unnerving. Trying to ignore Jake's penetrating stare, Chanty focused on her training. Lewis set up various obstacles for her, each one designed to challenge her agility and precision. She imagined her own foolishness from the previous night as the obstacles, channeling her frustration into her attacks. Her sword sliced through the air with a newfound power, each strike more forceful than the last. David, Marco, Justin, and Gabriel were also watching from a distance. They had seen her progress and were impressed by her dedication. Today, however, Chanty's attacks had a different kind of intensity. Her anger at herself for her perceived foolishness fueled her every move. She was determined to prove herself, not just to her teacher and friends, but to herself as well. "Good, Chanty," Lewis called out, encouraging her as she completed a particularly difficult maneuver. She was almost flawless now, rarely making mistakes. Her sword no longer slipped from her grasp as it once did. Lewis was an excellent teacher, patient and perceptive, knowing exactly how to push her to her limits. As Chanty trained, she couldn't help but think of Jacob. If Lewis was this skilled, then how much more formidable must Jacob be? Lewis had mentioned that he was second only to Jacob. The thought of facing Jacob in a duel both excited and terrified her. Despite the complications in their relationship, she wanted to test her skills against him, to see how far she had come. After an intense session, Lewis called for a break. Chanty was breathing heavily, her muscles aching from the exertion. Lorena, her ever-faithful assistant, approached with a bottle of water and a cloth to wipe away her sweat. Chanty gratefully accepted them, taking a long drink and dabbing at her face. She found a large rock to sit on, overlooking the ocean. As she caught her breath, her thoughts drifted back to Jake. He was still standing under the tree, his posture relaxed yet alert. His presence was a constant distraction. He was strikingly handsome, his dark long hair falling perfectly around his chiseled features. His piercing eyes seemed to see right through her, making her feel exposed and vulnerable. Chanty glanced at her healing wounds, the scars from the recent battle with Jacob, and Vasper still visible on her arms and legs. Her body was marked with the signs of her determination and resilience. She was grateful for Lorena's care, knowing that her recovery would have been much slower without her help. Jake's intense gaze never left her. She felt his eyes on her, a mix of admiration and something deeper, something she couldn't quite identify. She met his gaze for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. He gave her a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement and encouragement. Chanty managed a tired smile in return, despite her racing heart. As she sat there, trying to calm her thoughts, she noticed Lewis sitting on another rock, also taking a break. He looked at her and gave her a thumbs up. "Good job, Chanty," he said with a smile. She couldn't help but smile back, despite her exhaustion. Her thoughts drifted to her mistakes and the new scars from today's practice. She was improving, but the process was painful and slow. She took a deep breath, feeling the sea breeze on her face, trying to focus on the positives. Chanty leaned back against the rock, closing her eyes for a moment. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing, a reminder of the world outside her training. She couldn't shake the feeling of Jake's eyes on her. It was as if he was trying to communicate something without words, something she wasn't sure she was ready to understand. Opening her eyes, she looked at the tree where Jake stood. His figure was framed by the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. He looked almost ethereal, like a hero from an epic tale. His presence was both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder of what she was fighting for and what she still had to overcome. As she prepared to return to her training, Chanty knew she couldn't let her awkwardness feelings for Jake distract her. She had to focus on her goal, on becoming stronger and more skilled. But the image of Jake standing under that tree, his intense gaze burning into her, would stay with her. The morning session of Chanty's practice with Lewis ended around noon, allowing them a break for lunch before resuming in the afternoon. As the day progressed, Chanty continued her intense training, pushing herself to improve. It was nearly 6 p.m. by the time she made her way back up to the mansion, savoring the gentle breeze and the beauty of the sunset. As she entered the dining area, the table was already set for dinner. Lorena greeted her warmly and immediately called David to join them for the meal. Throughout dinner, Chanty was showered with praise from David, who acknowledged her progress and dedication. She thanked him sincerely, grateful for his support and encouragement. The absence of the other men in their group was noticeable but didn't detract from the pleasantness of the meal. David brought up an important topic, mentioning that they could soon return to Chanty's vineyard to handle the legal matters and paperwork related to her father's estate. He explained that they would be accompanied by Jacob, Jake, and Lewis. A slight anxiety gripped Chanty at the thought of seeing Jacob again after the incident. How would she face the man who had professed his love for her and, in a moment of passion, kissed her without her consent? Despite the complications, Chanty still considered Jacob a friend and hoped their relationship would remain amicable. She had forgiven him for his actions, understanding that he was carried away by his feelings. David emphasized the importance of Jacob's presence due to his unique power, blue fire, which could counter Lyca's fiery abilities in case of an attack. This explanation made Chanty feel more at ease, knowing there was a practical reason for Jacob's involvement. She reassured David that she had no issues with Jacob, and her forgiveness was genuine. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and Chanty expressed her excitement about seeing her horse, Rhonda, again. The thought of reuniting with the white horse, a precious gift from her late mother, filled her with joy. She was grateful to Arnold for taking care of Rhonda and ensuring she was safe from the mansion fire. They also discussed bringing Chanty's father's ashes to David's villa to be placed beside the remains of David's parents. This gesture of honoring their loved ones felt significant and poignant, and they meticulously planned the details. After dinner, Chanty sought solace in Jake's garden, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. However, Jake was nowhere to be found. Disappointed but understanding, she returned to the mansion and headed to her room. Lorena had prepared a soothing bath for her, and Chanty spent several minutes soaking in the warm water, letting the day's exhaustion wash away. As she lay in bed, her thoughts drifted to the Sword of Destiny. What did it look like? How would she find it? The legend said it would call to her when she turned 18, but it all seemed so fantastical. She stared at the sword resting against her bedside table, wondering if she would ever truly understand the mysteries surrounding her. In the middle of her sleep, Chanty felt the heat of a hand gently caressing her cheek. She startled awake, only to see Vasper standing beside her bed, illuminated by the moonlight streaming in through the open window. "Vasper," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she tried to contain her surprise. Vasper signaled for her to keep quiet. Her heart raced with a mix of emotions, fear, excitement, and an undeniable thrill. She struggled to conceal her true feelings from Vasper, who stood there, impossibly handsome in a leather jacket, jeans, and leather boots. His striking appearance made her knees weak, yet she held herself back, trying to maintain composure. He smiled at her, a smile that melted her resolve. She stood up, saying nothing, and Vasper moved closer, erasing any space between them. Chanty felt her body tremble with anticipation, and an electric sensation coursed through her veins. Why did Vasper have this effect on her? This time, she was not paralyzed. She could move. Vasper pulled her into a tight embrace and whispered in her ear, "I missed you so much. I thought I would go crazy waiting for this moment." His voice, a deep, electrifying caress, sent shivers down her spine. If only she could stop time, she would have done it in that moment. Chanty wanted to tell him how much she missed him too, but she bit her tongue, restraining herself. Vasper cupped her face, his fingers trailing along her lips, and she closed her eyes, ready for his kiss. When she opened them, she saw Vasper gazing deeply into her eyes, his face alight with love and happiness. Was she reading his expression correctly? Or was she merely succumbing to his charm? "Chanty, you're my life. Without you, I have no reason to live," Vasper confessed, his voice full of raw emotion. Chanty was stunned, staring into his eyes. Did she hear him right? His words sounded like music, his touch like electricity. Unable to hold back any longer, Chanty wrapped her arms around Vasper's neck and kissed him passionately. She didn't care about anything else. The world faded away as she felt Vasper's eager response, his kisses hungry and desperate, as if there were no tomorrow. His tongue sought hers, and he held her tight, his longing mirrored in her own fervent embrace. Vasper's kisses trailed down her neck, sending waves of heat through her body. She could only moan his name repeatedly, the only coherent thought in her mind. "Vasper," she whispered again and again, feeling his hands roam her back, his lips creating a fire on her skin. I missed you so much, Vasper whispered against her neck, his voice thick with desire. They were both consumed by their longing, their need for each other undeniable. Shanta's hands roamed over Vasper's chest, fumbling with the zipper of his jacket, eager to feel his skin against hers. But suddenly, Vasper grabbed her hands, stopping her. She looked at him, confused, feeling a sudden chill wash over her. "We can't," he said, his voice pained. "Not like this." His words froze her in place, the heat of her desire replaced by a cold wave of embarrassment. Her face burned with shame, and she tried to pull away, but Vasper held her tight. But her tears streamed down her cheeks unconsciously. Jake's eyes panic. "Chanty, it's not that I don't want to. You have no idea how much I want you, how much I love you," Vasper explained softly, his voice pleading. He wiped away her tears with gentle fingers. "But not like this." Shanta stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Vasper kissed her again, a tender, lingering kiss that spoke volumes of his longing. He wanted her, but he wanted it to be right. She felt a mix of relief and disappointment. "Come with me," Vasper said, breaking the kiss. "David is awake. I can sense his presence." Panic seized Chanty at the mention of David's name. But before she could react, Vasper had whisked her away from her room. In seconds, they were standing on a secluded beach. As they materialized on the secluded island, Chanty marveled at how clear-headed she felt. Unlike the disorienting teleportation she experienced with Jake, Vasper's teleportation left her feeling steady and calm. Vasper gazed at her, his strikingly handsome face illuminated by the moonlight. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice serious but gentle. "We can't go beyond kisses and hugs. If we do, it will ruin the prophecy and your mission. Your virginity is crucial for you to wield the sword of destiny. Without it, everything we are fighting for will be lost. And even if we tried to run away and live a peaceful life, we would always be hunted by my family. They would never stop until we are destroyed." Shanta looked at him, absorbing his words. The weight of their situation settled over her, and she realized the depth of Vasper's commitment to her mission. Despite his overwhelming desire for her, he prioritized her destiny above all else. "Vasper, she began, but he silenced her with a tender kiss. "I won't be the one to jeopardize your mission, Chanty," he whispered against her lips. "Your mission is too important. You need to stay strong to face my father. The sword of destiny will give you the power you need. Without it, we're lost." The clarity in his eyes left no room for doubt. Chanty felt a surge of gratitude and admiration for Vasper. At that moment, she understood that he was not just fighting for her but also against his own family. "Why didn't you come sooner?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Vasper sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Laika has been watching me closely. She's suspicious of my actions. I had to find the right moment to come to you without her following. She is powerful and dangerous. She's the reason your father was killed and your mansion burned down. I couldn't risk leading her to you." Shanta shivered, the memory of her father's death and the destruction of her home flashing through her mind. She reached out, intertwining her fingers with Vasper's, seeking comfort in his touch. "Thank you for protecting me," she said softly, her eyes searching his. Vasper pulled her close, their bodies fitting together perfectly. "I will always protect you, Chanty. No matter what." They stood there in silence, the gentle waves lapping at their feet, the moon casting a silvery glow over them. The weight of their reality pressed down on them, but in each other's arms, they found a moment of peace. "Let's stay here for a while," Shanta suggested, leaning her head against his chest. Vasper nodded, holding her tightly. They watched the moonlight dance on the water, finding solace in their shared silence. Despite the looming dangers, they cherished this fleeting moment of tranquility, drawing strength from each other's presence. The silence between them became a tangible connection, an unspoken understanding of the stakes involved. The tension, both from their mission and their undeniable attraction, hung in the air, thick and electric. "Chanty," Vasper whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "I want you to know, I've always wanted you, from the very first moment. But I can't let my desire ruin everything. Chanty felt a shiver run down her spine at his words. She pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes, which were filled with a mix of longing and restraint. I feel the same way, Vasper. But knowing you're by my side gives me strength. Their lips met again, a fiery kiss full of suppressed passion and desperate need. Vasper's hands roamed her back, pulling her closer, as if he couldn't get enough of her. Chanty's fingers tangled in his hair, her body responding to every touch, every caress. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent. Vasper's lips trailed down her neck, planting hot, open-mouthed kisses that sent jolts of pleasure through her. She moaned softly, her hands exploring the hard muscles of his back. His leather jacket felt cool under her touch, a stark contrast to the heat of his body. Vasper, she breathed, her voice a mix of desire and need. I want you so much. I want you too, he replied, his voice husky with emotion. But we have to be careful. We can't risk everything for one moment of weakness. His words were a reminder of their reality, but it didn't diminish the intensity of their connection. They continued to kiss, their passion simmering just below the surface, a slow burn that threatened to ignite into an uncontrollable fire. Chanty felt her knees go weak as Vasper's kisses grew more insistent. She clung to him, her body trembling with desire. She wanted to lose herself in him, to forget about the prophecy and their mission, if only for a moment. But Vasper's restraint held them back, his love for her stronger than his need. Finally, he pulled away, his breathing ragged. We need to stop, he said, his voice full of regret. For your sake, for our future. She nodded, tears of frustration and longing in her eyes. I understand, Vasper. But it doesn't make it any easier. He kissed her once more, a slow, lingering kiss that spoke of promises and dreams. I know. But one day, when all of this is over, we will have our time. They stood there, holding each other, the cool night air wrapping around them like a shroud. The moon continued its journey across the sky, a silent witness to their love and their struggle. As dawn approached, Vasper knew it was time to take her back. He kissed her one last time, a kiss filled with all the emotions they couldn't put into words. Then, with a heavy heart, he teleported them back to the mansion. Chanty found herself back in her room, the first light of morning filtering through the windows. She touched her lips, still tingling from Vasper's kisses. She realized, with a mixture of relief and surprise, that this time, he hadn't extracted her memories. He hadn't seen what had happened with Jacob. It was a small mercy, a sign of his deep respect for her privacy and their fragile connection. As she lay back on her bed, exhausted but content, she knew that despite the challenges ahead, she had Vasper by her side. And that thought gave her the strength to face whatever came next.